Wednesday at 5 p.m. We call to order. Any items too late for the agenda? Okay. Correspondence and presentations. Any correspondence? Share with the group.
There is no correspondence now,
Okay.
but there are presentations.
Presentations. Start off with staff promotion new hires, or
Yes, definitely. Randy's not here yet. I'm sure he'll
Okay.
be here shortly. So we hired Randy Green as our new CFO. So, and before he held the position of a controller. Yes. And Tammy Sales is our interim chief public services officer and deputy chief librarian. So you're welcome. Would you say a few words?
So I'm Tammy Sales. I have been with the library district for 8 years. Some of you know me when I started as the nonprofit librarian and then served as director of adult education for 3 years. And now I'm going to serve as interim chief public services officer and deputy chief librarian.
You got some mouth.
Yes, I like those titles. So, and then I get to continue on and introduce, some of you got to meet as you came in, Christine Layton, who's going to serve as our interim director of adult education. Christine has been with us. Yes, we're very excited. She's been with us for about a year as the adult education manager, and she's really played a vital role in the department in ensuring that the department has procedures and processes in place to the point where we are consistently being recognized by Department of Education every month in their newsletter for being on target for our measurable skill gains and retention numbers. So I'm excited to introduce Christine, and I know she's going to do a great job in that interim role.
Thank you so much.
Gary Seiling, Chief Facilities Management Officer. I'd like to introduce Travis Keaton, who's our new Facilities Project Manager. Travis joined us a couple of weeks ago and hit the ground running, and has already gotten several projects off the ground and moving forward. I'm excited to see that, and I'm excited to have Travis join us.
so he knows what he got into.
Yeah.
He's very welcome. I'm very excited.
It's great. Next is top line voter poll results.
Michelle, are they online?
The presenter?
Yes.
Yeah, we were just confirming. So he is on there and he is on the screen here. So let me show you the screen with Alex. Hold on, Alex.
While we're waiting for this, I'd like to introduce Randy Helms. Randy, you've got someone you'd like to introduce to us.
I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Randy Helms, City Council District 2, as liaison for the City Council here at the library, which I really enjoy and proud to be a part of. I want to introduce Ms. Orrin Jones, who's a junior at Air Academy High School. She is acting as an intern for the City Council for the shadowing need. And, so we're trying to show her everything that we do in the City Council, and I'm afraid we've exploded her. But I would like her to stand up and show she uses Library 21C, even though she lives on the Air Force Academy base, and she. I thought it was really important for her to see the Pikes Peak Library District Board of Trustees meeting as part of what we do both in the city and the City Council. So, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to have you. Okay. You ready?
I think we're ready. Yes.
Yes.
For the board members, I'd like to just, suggestion was made that we not discuss in detail the ballot process. So, hold your questions on that if you have. Okay.
All right, and we have Alex. He is with the firm we use for our most recent voter poll, and actually the first one we did as well, WPAI. And I'm going to pass it over to him. He's already sharing his screen. So Alex, if you can hear us, you can kick it off.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Then we have two-way communication. All right. So this is some research that was done for the library district in terms of talking to the voting population, though we did, it was expansive. This is not likely voters. This is registered voters, with the purpose of sort of discussing some of the foundational metrics for the library: usage, general perception, those sorts of issues. And then there was a section that is not in today's presentation on sort of some of the communications the library might use, but that's something that Michelle can brief you on in more detail. So the goal of this sort of research is to allow the library to situate itself strategically and see what goals are being met, what are the public perceptions, what is the sort of brand profile, if you will, of the institution. And you ideally want to track those things over time because it allows you to see where issues are arising before they become problems. And it also allows you to track sort of the general environment and things that are going to affect the library down the road and give you a heads up that those things are coming. So with that, we'll commence the process. So one of the things you always want to do with survey work is, one, you want some kind of a proxy for people's general optimism about the world, and two, you need to ask them a question to start that they have an opinion about, because you got to get them into the process. So one of the things to do with that, one of the ways to do that is to ask a right track, wrong track question. You'll see these results are quite consistent with last year. You know, it's a little bit better than even in terms of right track. This is sort of a situational question. You're going to ask this to sort of see if starting to move quickly one way or the other, and there's effectively no change from last year. So images, this is where you're asking if they have a sort of favorable or unfavorable opinion of people, institutions, ideas, whatever it is you're looking at. In this case, we've asked about the Pikes Peak Library District and also the generic public library. And the reason you ask both is that the perfect public library in people's heads doesn't have problems like not carrying the book they want, or not offering the program they want, or not being open when they want, because it doesn't really exist. So one of the things you want to see is how big is the drop off between the imaginary perfect public library and the actual library district services. The answer here is very small. In the real world, an 84% favorable with only 2% unfavorable is something I don't get unless I'm asking about puppies. So, you know, so is there a little bit of drop off between, you know, the imaginary ideal of the library and the actual library? Yes. But as those drop offs go, that's about as small as you'll ever see. So and you can see from the name ID here at the bottom, one of the issues you often run into for institutions or brands is that most people have no clue what they are or that they even exist. In this case, of course, everybody has an opinion about what a public library is, and pretty much everybody knows and has an opinion about what the Pikes Peak Library District is. That's very good news. You don't want to be invisible. So this is sort of comparing it to last year's survey. Again, here you want to see if you have a trend problem. The only thing to note here is that all of these changes are well inside the margin of error. So these are statistical noise. There's nothing to see here. Things haven't changed since last year. So that takes us to, how often do people use the library? This is a very important question for the library system, and also a very important one for any kind of public and communications you want to do. So the answer is about 8% of registered voters use it at least a few times a week, which is actually quite high. Another 6% said once a week, 12% is a few times a month. And then everybody after that, you sort of lump into the I'm there occasionally, but I couldn't really tell you when the last time was category. So that'd be about 30%, and then 42% claim to never. That's actually pretty good for a library system, and the surveys that I do in 7 or 8 states now in the last year. So, you know, that's a pretty high usage rate. And you can see that it's fairly consistent across a lot of demographics. And, you know, this is actually a pretty solid result for the system. You're getting traffic. Now, the important thing, of course, for this one is that the system can then compare this against its own records of who's actually in the door doing stuff and start to see how that maps out. This is an important one for any public institution. Would you say asking the voters whether or not they feel they're getting value for money from that public institution? And the answer for 3/4 of folks was yes. You only got no from 10%. If you don't like your numbers, pretty much every public institution in America would like to trade you for them right now. Don't look under the cover, just take the yes. So this is great, right? I mean, this in a real world where you're actually offering real service, and have to make real trade-offs, to have 7.5:1 saying they're getting good value for money, I don't get to see that a lot. I don't get to see that a lot at all. And one of the things you'll see is it's not you get good results across various partisanships, ages. This is a very encouraging result for the library. Now, municipal services, you asked this again as a comparison, because one of the things is that most voters don't actually really know what services are offered by who. You know, they're not too clear if it's a municipal service or a county service or a library district service or a federal service. Is one of the challenges for us, for a local government entity, is trying to be aware of how your perceptions of your service differ from those of sort of the generic local public services. And the answer here is that you outperform the value for money by quite a large margin, 75 to 61 agreement, and even more on the people who are disagreeing with getting value, 10-25. So it's not that all public services are thought of this positively in the county. It's that, you know, the library district gets this particular review, and generically municipal services get a different, not quite as sparkly review. Bluntly, this is still a very good evaluation from a voter population to a local government. You know, there are an awful lot of parts of the country you don't have that, but it's not as positive as the view of the library district's value. This is another one of those tracking questions you always just kind of want to throw out there to get a sense of how people feel when they come in the door and when they leave the door. Are you satisfied or dissatisfied with your experience, either in person or online, using the district facilities, spaces, services, and resources? And this is roughly in line with the value for money. You got 77% saying they were satisfied and only 3% saying they were dissatisfied. That's, you know, within margin of error of 0. So everybody tip a hat to the frontline staff and the website maintainers of the website, because clearly they're doing something right here. And as for the slight decline in satisfaction, again, statistical noise. That's not a. So this we put in there just to sort of get a sense of how, whether or not people thought the library was an important local service. So do you agree or disagree with the statement the library provides critical programs and resources to our communities and must protect its place in El Paso County? You got 92 to 3. Again, short of me cheating and creating a push question, it's really hard to get that to happen. So on the upside, you're clearly presenting a service that people value, even in this case, over 85% of the people who don't use the service. You know, 42% of the respondents claim to never have been in the door, and yet the overwhelming majority of those people still thought it provided critical programs and resources to the community. That's a nice reservoir of goodwill to have. So this is where we get some of the less good news. And this isn't about the library in particular. This is just sort of a reflection of some of the things going on in the wider world. When it comes to local property taxes and fees, do you feel local taxes are too high, somewhat too high, all the way down to too low? You ask this question because this is an optimism proxy for people's view of their economic situation, right? They're not actually responding to the question about local property taxes because the vast majority of them couldn't tell you what your local property tax bill was. What they're responding to was, do I feel like I'm paying too much? Or is it more than I can afford at the moment? So, you started out about even statistically last year, and that changed pretty dramatically over 6 months to 60% saying too high, only 26% saying somewhat or too low. And that's a reflection of all kinds of economic stressors. Now, what unfortunately this doesn't tell you is what those specific stressors are for individuals or groups, right? I would have loved to have had the budget to ask everybody all the follow-up questions, but in the real world, that never actually happens. I never get to answer all the questions. So we can't break out to what extent this is inflation, this is local tax increases, this is concern about deficits. Who knows? You don't have the data.
Even tax season. It's a month out of when you have to pay your taxes, so people are thinking about those kind of things, which makes sense.
Yep, and that's absolutely part of it. You're also going to have a question about where this fits in the assessment and payment cycle and blah, blah, blah. But this is a question asked on any kind of a survey pretty much anywhere in America right now, and you're going to see the red line trending up and the green line trending down. So this is an early indicator, a leading indicator for the library's management and board to consider in terms of what you're looking at in terms of people's attitudes towards cost in the year to come. So information flow, this is about how many people are thinking about the upcoming municipal election and local and state and offices and the rest of it. And the answer, of course, is not very many. People have lives. So 17% claims a lot or some, 80% say not much at all or nothing at all. Some of the folks who say a lot are lying. But this is a good way it's a proxy of seeing who's connected to the news right now about what's happening in terms of local politics and local administration. So what it tells you is that 80% of the electorate is paying effectively no attention to this at all. That's an important thing to bear in mind as a system if you're going to put a funding question on the ballot, or if you're going to be doing public outreach on issues that might be discussed in that context. You have to remember that right now you're talking to a relatively small crowd. In terms of where people get this information, again, I wouldn't get too fussed given this is only 70 respondents about the specific percentages here. The N size just isn't that big, but what you're really looking for here is to what extent are people getting their news from, paid ads versus news and other sort of content, and how much of that is online. So the answer is the majority of what they're seeing is advertising. Earned media is less than half of folks, and that almost 40% now are getting their information about local stuff online, which, given that local electorates tend to be older, more established, and biased towards print and television, is a steadily rising number. That's just something you have to bear in mind when you're trying to put together an outreach plan. Just because an audience was available to you via print advertising 5 years ago doesn't mean they still are. So again, this is the kind of thing you want to keep ideally on a track on an annual basis, because it just allows you to see how the information environment for folks you might want to talk to changes over time. some of this is just interesting for the communications that people are using. For the board's purposes, that isn't relevant. So this is the other thing. If for the 70 people who did have response to the info flow, one of the things you want to see is, and always be, it's sort of a branding issue, is do the folks who have heard or spoken about the organization or your issue or whatever, but in this case, the organization, do they walk away from that conversation and that information gathering feeling more or less favorable towards you than when they started? And in this case, again, more good news. You get 66% more favorable, only 13% unfavorable. And yes, it's an N of 70 and the margin of error here is like 17%, but even in the worst case, you're still doing vastly better than even. And this is a very positive thing. It means when the PPLD does cross people's radars, they come out of that informational exchange feeling better inclined towards the library district, which when you consider what your general fave is actually quite remarkable. Again, it's always nice if you're trying to convince people to use your facility or services or to support your organization. It really helps to have something to offer that they actually want. Which in this case, it appears you really do. And so there was also a test done on some potential ballot language and some messaging for that. I will leave that to the communications team. That's not really that's a very micro thing and not really a board issue. So there's I'm sure a communications reporting process that you will go through for that. So rather than take up a great deal of time for something that will have absolutely no impact on the board's work, I've excised that. But if there's anything that folks would like me to elaborate on, questions that you have, by all means.
This is Aaron. I've got a couple quick questions for you, if you don't mind. Sorry, thank you. Can you hear me now? So a couple quick questions. This falls into the don't ask policy, just telling me not to ask it. So I was curious, there were 404 respondents, I believe you mentioned at the beginning of the slide, or the beginning of the presentation. That was 404 respondents out of how many that were solicited for the survey? Do you know?
Couldn't tell you offhand. Response rate will be somewhere between 2% and 5%.
Thank you. So I believe I know the answer to this based off of some of your commentary going through the slide deck, but for the questions that were related to the experience with the library district, that was not controlled for only users of the library, right? That included respondents who said they had never attended or participated, correct?
It did, but you've got the breakouts here for users versus not users. That's in the crosstabs.
Oh, okay, I see that. Thank you. I missed that earlier.
The issue is that here when you're when the favorability is that high, what you wind up with is a situation where you don't wind up with much difference between users and non-users. It is higher with users, but even non-users have a startling approval of the services, which I find interesting because they aren't using them.
Sure. All right. Last question I think I have was towards the end you had the refused option that was marked on there. Was refused an option on the survey for people to mark, or was that just someone skipped that question, was marked as refused?
Refused is never given as an option. It's a response if people just say no. It's not one of the presented options.
They were all conducted by phone, cell phone, landline, or cell phone.
Got it. Thank you.
So and actually, I wanted. Are you done? Sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
Yes, I'm not.
So Alex, a quick thing that I realized that maybe we didn't start with is a little more information about your polling firm. So people understand that they are nationally recognized, reputable. They have worked with local clients like the city of Colorado Springs and the school district. So could you just share a little more about that so people in the room here, in particular our board, have an understanding?
Sure. I generally try to avoid boring people with the bio, but if you so WPAI is one of those terrible consulting firms that exists in the DC Beltway. We're one of the three larger I suppose vaguely conservative leaning polling firms. So we're one of the red ones. But that doesn't probably 40% of the work I personally do is political. So I work, I think this year I'm active in 41 states. And I do things all the way from city council races to Uber. For corporate and nonprofit stuff, I do charity work. And then there's political campaigns, candidates, committees, all of the wonderful panoply that goes on there. In Colorado, in addition to some corporate work and some congressional, state house, state senate, and city council and library initiative and funding initiatives and all sorts of other things. I've been working with some of the folks that are working with the library district for 6 years now. In Colorado Springs, so been around the block a couple of times locally, and I do work for libraries in 9 states right now. So there's sort of 7 large opinion research firms based around the Beltway. We're one of those 7.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. And being a library, of course, we love this kind of information. So does anyone else have any questions? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought that was some valuable information for you all to know.
I do.
There's one closer. So one of the questions, I think it was number 9, when you had the breakout, do you have a breakout between in-person and online? Or was it just a general question for anybody?
I would have loved to have had a breakout question for all of the ways in which people use the library, but the budget didn't stretch me to ask that many questions.
All right, that was.
I can share, Scott, about that. So we do an annual library experience survey that we started in September 2019. So we do it every year ourselves. And we do break out that question and we can look at data like that. But that is specific to library patrons already using our services and resources. Okay. So just to let you know.
Okay. And then one more question. Number 6. When we were discussing that, maybe it wasn't number 6. Okay, so yeah, it was this one. When you ask this question, is this for the people that actually go into the library and do something? So in other words, they check out a book.
No.
Can you elaborate on a little bit of what that specific question kind of encompasses?
It's you're asking them if they would identify themselves as having used the facilities and services. We didn't have the luxury of all the questions to follow up and ask what they might specifically have done.
Okay, so I guess my point is I'm trying to see, of these people that we asked, did this include those that may have just gone in and looked at something and then walked out?
Yes, so it can be however they define it. So again, it's a pretty broad question, but this is something too that in our annual library experience survey, we delve into a little more, again, since we can actually do it versus paying a reputable polling firm. So we were limited in how many questions we could ask with the budget that we had. So this is a pretty broad definition. And I've actually started to go back and do some comparisons to our 2019 community needs assessment and see what is comparable. And this is actually very similar to a question we asked in that survey that went to 1,000 community members. So I mean, there is some apples and oranges because it's registered voters versus like anyone in the years, but we do have some comparison to look at it. And again, and then that one delved in much deeper as well.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where you start to try to use your ability to control some of your internal metrics to see as a cross check on the wider question, right? Like, are the vast majority of people who come through the door engaging with staff or not? Are the vast majority of people who come through the door using a service or program or not? I mean, it allows you to start to look at these numbers and then break them down at your end, because of course the library itself has all kinds of data and metrics on what is actually happening, right? Who's actually using the website? Are they just surfing around? Do they just end on the landing page and go away, right? How deep are they going into the website? How long are they there? So how much did that count as having used it for somebody? The answer is if they went to look to see if a book existed or something, that probably does count as a usage for them, even if they were only on the website long enough to type something in the search bar. So those are the kind of depth questions that the library is going to have to figure out which pieces of information it wants to track, right? What counts as a useful metric?
And I'm more than happy with some of the comparisons I'm doing. If you all would like me to present that at some point, whether it be a committee or at a full board meeting, we can do that as well.
Okay, thanks. Follow up on that. So are we using this type of data to influence and inform the types of questions we ask in the other surveys?
The annual library experience survey, we do look at it every year in terms of the questions, make adjustments. A lot of them, there are baseline questions that we consistently use, but we do kind of reconsider. It's like, should we change? Is there demographic information that we should be collecting? Is there something else we should be asking? So I'm happy. I can even share that in advance if you all would, again, as part of maybe a future presentation. So then you can kind of see what we have. And then we will be looking at this voter poll and seeing, is there things that we should incorporate or consider as well?
Well, and one of the things you have to bear in mind is that there are certain demographic or sort of stratification questions that I can ask over a phone poll that would probably be considered extremely creepy if the library staff said, "So do you own your house?" That's probably going to be the end of that conversation. Whereas I can ask that over the phone, and because it's anonymized data to you, you have no idea who that answer was. People are okay with giving it to me. So there are things that I can do that library staff simply won't be able to, because it will cause a communication problem that's just not worth it for the library, right?
And
so
clarify as well, the annual experience survey we do is actually online. So there is a difference in terms of probably doing a phone survey and how people do those versus submitting information, which for us, you can do it via tablet here, you can do it from home, you can do it from like wherever. So there is that difference of experience as well. But I think definitely some of the demographic information can be some easy things that we add in.
Well, and the luxury for a user experience survey is it's a self-selecting group of people who actually care about the library and use it. The drawback to asking the wider population is you need people to answer even if they don't care, or they're not one of the 8% who's there regularly. So that's.
Any additional questions or comments on the presentation? Hey, thank you very much for making this presentation. We appreciate the time and effort you put into it and explaining what's going on. So we appreciate that.
Pleasure. Happy to help.
Thank
Any
you,
further
Alex.
questions? You always know how to reach me. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving to public comments. Are there any public comments?
We do have someone who would like to come with comments.
Okay.
Shannon? Hi, Shannon. Come on up. So we're going to need to ask you this.
Oh, that's not. I'm a teacher. I can totally project. Yeah. Hi, I'm Shannon Fletcher. Where's the camera? So where do I stand? Oh, am I good? Okay, cool. I'm Shannon Fletcher. I am a local English teacher at a high school here in the Springs. And I am here as a concerned citizen.
about the potential banning of books. Let me give you a little bit of background. I am a conservative. I am an avid reader. I read about 60 to 70 books a year. I do go to the library 1 time a week. There you go. I both use in person and online. There you go. Just to add some fun. I've been in education for 15 plus years, and in English the whole time. And I just want to bring up a couple of things. I have an issue with some banned books. We teach them. I'm a high school English teacher. I teach banned books. We teach Gatsby. We teach Mice and Men. This is American Lit. That's one of my primary classes I teach, and has been for a long time. So I can talk your head off about them. But one of our essential questions that we asked our students to think about when we're examining literature is how does the literature fit the characters and ideals of the nation, and what can we tell about the people at that time? What did they prioritize? What was important? And how can we apply that to today's in our society? And we asked that throughout the whole year. And my concern with banning books is that if kiddos are not able to understand the intricacies of what's important to us now, I feel like that is going to be lacking. It's no secret, kids aren't reading as much anymore. And Netflix, though, is actually helping us when they are doing some series and they're applied from books. The kids are like, this is based on a book. I want to read the book. And that brings up great conversations. And yes, thank you. I can talk about it. But I just want to bring up that Gatsby, let's talk about Gatsby. It's banned, right? And if you were to look at why Gatsby is banned, Gatsby's banned because people have affairs and they drink alcohol. That's basically why it's banned.
So where is it banned?
It's banned in several school districts. It's banned. I mean, I can totally geek out about that
I mean,
later.
it's not banned in the library.
It is not, but it is a banned book. And so, however, what we are allowed to talk about, though, as I teach the novel, is that Fitzgerald actually wrote that book to criticize the hedonistic or the pursuit of pleasure, that criticism of the 1920s, and he was criticizing that. And if you have a good teacher or someone who is a good reader, look at that book and be able to help kids see, like, this isn't actually about alcohol, or this isn't about having an affair, it's about criticizing that and the lack of morality in society. And my concern, just as a teacher, is that if we continually try to shelter our kids, they're getting a really big lack of education that they're going to find elsewhere. And I'd much rather have them ask me or a parent or something, and good literature points to morality and good questions. Did I hit the minute?
You did.
All right.
Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
I just had one question, Tiana. When's the last time we banned a book from the library?
I don't remember or recall.
Yeah, that's not our policy, basically, to ban books. So at this library, you probably can find copies of the banned book someplace. We may not be available for children to look at indiscriminately, but
Yeah,
we definitely have a book.
great. That's what I would like to keep. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, moving along. Turning to business items, decision 22-4-1, minutes of the March 16, 2022 meeting.
Make a motion that we accept the minutes of March 16, 2022.
So your second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes as in our notes here. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, minutes pass. Consent items.
We don't have any.
We have no new business in that area, right? Okay, any unfinished business?
No, there's also no unfinished business.
Okay, new business. Decision 22-4-2, solicitation policy. Michelle?
All right. So we did a review of the solicitation policy internally. So it's always done by committee. and then goes through our management and leadership team, and then to internal affairs. And so this is the proposed policy in your packet, starting on page 8. There is a decision cover page prior, but really there's no changes to the board policy. There are some updates to the procedural section though. So we did add in terms of what's allowable on-site for on-site solicitation is voter registration is allowed inside of facilities, and that is with approval. And then also in terms of activities and nonprofit organizations, they can conduct surveys, again, with approval. And then there were some slight changes about in terms of community bulletin boards and other things there as well. And then I'm just going to give as a caveat on this side, something that's not directly, it's related to this policy, but not something that's included, is we do kind of a civic engagement electioneering guidelines for staff that we share out with everyone prior to kind of election season. So that way then staff are very clear on kind of what's allowable within our facilities, outside of our facilities, within the reach of ballot boxes. So we do try to make it easy for staff as well to ensure that they're following the law. So, is there any questions?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I have many times registered or afford to use a room in the library for nonprofit work I'm involved in. And it does ask in there, I think if you're going to sell items or something, does that pop out somewhere if it's, because that has to be approved, correct?
Yes.
So if I said, yes, I'm going to sell items, I don't even know if it asks what items or anything. I've never sold anything, that's probably why I don't know. But then does that send a message somewhere so that it can be approved, or how does that work?
So all of that information will go to the approval party. So in this case, now the way it's structured is each library location has that authority, and they have designated staff their locations to review the approvals. So they can determine if they approve it or not. If they have questions, then they have that opportunity to follow up and ask more questions. And if there is any denial, then they can do that as well. But we have to be very careful and usually do not allow sales within our meeting room. So say some Girl Scout were going to do something like that. Instead, if they said we're doing sales or we're doing a fundraiser of that sort, we might then follow up with them and offer them to say, hey, you can sit outside with your booth if the weather's nice. And do it that way. So again, try to kind of work with them and find out exactly what they're looking for. But it's very dependent. Typically, if it is some kind of corporate sales, in that sense, that's where it's definitely not something that we're going to prioritize if there's other groups that would like to use the space instead.
I was just curious about that. Thank you.
So it does not affect the transit fight.
Any other questions?
Thank you for outlining
Yes.
what's changed.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it is. I know. I will say I appreciate that the board made that recommendation and has made it much easier to track and also get staff input and changes as well. So.
Okay, decision 22-4-3, switch and uninterruptible power supply. I'm sorry.
I move that the Pikes Peak Library District Board of Trustees approve the solicitation policy as presented.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the decision 22-4-2. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passed. Moving along with 22-4-3 of the switch and ups purchase revision. Rich.
Good afternoon, board members. When I was here before you in February, my recollection is trustee Salt, you had asked a question if we were having supply chain problems. Or someone asked the question. So my recollection is not good. Yes. But and my response was we won't know until we start ordering equipment. Well, we started ordering equipment, and unfortunately we are having supply chain problems. So I'm coming before the board to ask for an increase as far as the budget is concerned, and also the UPS equipment that we need to replace with a different model. And I'm asking for an increase. And there's a catch to it, and the catch is it's not reimbursable by E-rate. So E-rate typically pays 80% of the cost in this particular case. We have to get back to the E-rate folks, and they basically rule that we can continue with our program, but they're not going to compensate us or be involved with subsidizing us as far as the cost increase. So the cost increase is $24.96, just over our projected budget, which was $300,000 by $278. So that's why I'm asking for the increase. And I'm also stating that I have in my management IT reserve sufficient funds to cover the increase. And then one of the other things I was just thinking about this, as far as the E-rate program, there's a specific timeline and cycle. So I know that some people will say, well, why don't you start it later or earlier? We run the risk of not getting the funding for that year if we started later than we are doing and try to compress that cycle. So for the near future, we're not going to win this one. So we're going to adhere to the cycle, which means that in your board report, you'll see that I'll be back next month for another request.
So I guess my question is, what's the confidence level that this 2,500 is going to get us what we need, and we're not going to run into additional?
In this particular case, as far as the equipment and the chips that were required, basically the company made a decision to discontinue that line. So they've given us the line that they already have, and they already have products for that line in this particular case.
Got it.
So don't know for the future ones, but we'll sure, you know.
Sure. Makes sense.
I do have a question. Are these better?
Yes.
A better model than what we were
Yeah.
originally? Figured so. Okay. Are there a motion?
I move that the Exeter Library District Board of Trustees approve the switch and uninterruptible power supply purchase revision as presented. Second.
Seconded to approve this request. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich. Decision 22-4-4, Pikes Peak Library District vision, mission, and values, down on page 11 in your packet. For those of us that were here for that session, we created this and we talked about it a number of times. It's gone to the committee, and this has been subjected here to us for a final approval. Any comments or questions?
This goes to internal affairs?
Yes.
Okay. Good. You guys have had problems with that? Just a problem with me.
Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion that we accept the PPLD values and mission statement as presented.
Second.
Okay, so moved and seconded that we approve the mission values, mission, and values statement in the package. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Okay, it's approved. So next on the decision, the Board of Trustees group photos suggested for the 15th of June. Yeah.
June 15th, yes. Can everyone attend? Look at your calendar real quick. I think most of you let me know that that would work. I just want to make sure I hear it.
First question, that's all.
I will send an email to everybody confirming June 15th.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Wearing dark clothes, correct?
Yeah, I'll insert all of those.
Okay.
Those suggestions for how to dress.
Okay.
Yes.
So moving on to item number 6, reports. Friends of Pikes Peak Library District.
Sorry, my allergies are kicking in, so I'm really croaky. I just, nothing really added to what I reported, but I wanted to point out 2 things. So the first thing is, I think last month I told you we made over $12,000 in our sales, but I wanted to give you the physical number of items we sold. So on Friday and Saturday, we sold 10,482 pieces. And because we keep, so, you know, little books, paperbacks, whatever. On Sunday, when we have the bag sale, we sold 363 bags of books. I mean, we cleaned out a lot. And we're already collecting stuff for our October sale. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, you clean everything out and then you just fill it all back up. And the other item I thought that was interesting was several years ago, an architect donated the original architectural plans for the Spider-Man feature at Universal Studios. And it just sat in the closet back there and was like, what should we do with this? And you know, these new directors that we have gotten, they are the, you know, they haven't been weighed down by stuff, so they're, oh, I'll check it out. So it was a legitimate donation because he was the architect, but still you sort of go, you know, property. So she contacted Universal and they just would love to have an original set because they didn't have that. So we sent it back to them and they are going to send us some passes to Universal Studios that then we will raffle off. Fundraiser. It's all about getting more money so we can help the library some more. So thank you.
Thanks, Rita. That's great news.
Nita, do you guys have the date already in the Monument Library or Lewis Palmer for the tea and ice cream social?
So the ice cream social will be the first weekend in August, that Saturday. So I believe that is August 6th. And the grand opening, you know, sort of with the historical, so for the library and the Historical Society, that will be August 13th. So 2 Saturdays in a row, and the friends we're going to make sure that both of those are big events. So ice cream at one and probably cupcakes or something crazy at the other one. We're not doing the tea yet because just too much, you know, getting everything started with Palmer Lake and everything. So that'll have to wait another year. Thank you.
Okay, Westlake Library District Foundation report. Lance.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Any questions about the report?
Just a recognition of a very large grant from Colorado Springs Health Foundation. Congratulations. Team.
My grant writer makes me look really good.
I know.
And that's difficult at times, so. No, we have been trying to get that Peer Navigator program up and launched for since I think almost the day I got here. So it was great to see that the Health Foundation recognized that the library could be a part of that solution, and so much so that they were gonna invest a nice sum of money in helping us pilot that program and test it to see if it really would be impactful in the long term.
Could you give me, I'm sorry, 30 seconds on what that program is?
So the Peer Navigator program is a program that many libraries have used nationally, and it supports the community resources that we offer. And so it will be funding 2 Peer Navigator positions. And so what the Peer Navigator, the importance of those these are people who have that lived experience that can relate to the patrons that are in need of those services. And so they really can empathize and, you know, they can speak their language and say, I know what you're going through. And then that usually breaks down a lot of barriers so that people feel more comfortable tapping into and asking for that type of support.
So, sorry, then.
Yep.
Those positions then report, because we have a social worker, will they kind of report through that?
That's correct.
Okay.
So it funds partially, so it's a 3-year grant. In year 1, it funds all 3 positions fully, the grant funds do, and then it stair steps down from there. But it funds 2 Peer Navigator positions and then a second social focused position.
Okay, great, thank you.
So it says Peer Navigator proof of concept. So is this a 3-year proof of concept?
It is. And another part that we were excited about was we put in a line item to request someone to help us measure the results and the impact of the program, so that we can, I mean, Dora's nodding her head, all of her years in education, I mean, she gets the measurables, right? And so we want to be able to say, is this something we believe that it is something that is going to make a meaningful impact? And we can point to other library systems that say that it has made, but we want to be able to show that, so that we can make an informed decision when it comes time to the library district to pick up that funding.
So what is our ticket that we're having in years 2 and 3 with the stair step down? Not to put you on the spot.
Oh, God. So we received 111,000. Michael, help me. I believe the total 3-year cost of the program is close to $600,000, and they are funding during the course of the 3-year program, $275,000.
Okay.
So this is probably good as I can do off the top of my head.
No, that's great. Thank you.
The same program that's been used by Mount Carmel Veteran Service Center, and they actually benefit quite heavily about this, so it's a great outcome.
Same concept, for sure.
Any other questions for Lance?
Good job.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Lance.
Also, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, financial report. Randy?
Hi, everyone. As you can see, you're only looking at January statements. I was actually working on February and March. A lot of February is usually a heavy month in getting tax revenue, and you're not seeing February statement, but we recorded about $12.5 million in property tax revenue for February, and then 500 or so thousand for the specialty tax, which is mostly vehicle revenue. And I'm kind of not concentrating on the 1 month of January just because there just isn't really enough information there for 1 month for us to really talk about a whole lot. So I'm kind of talking more what I'm seeing so far for the 3 months. So in February, I haven't had a chance to compare that to previous years and whether that was a rather large take on our property taxes, but we're in February, we're roughly 35% into our budget, which to me seemed a little unusual. But the plus side is that the month after you learn what you're going to get, they deposit into our investment account. So we've got, as we sit right now, about $23 million sitting in our investment account. The interest rate on that is nothing like it used to be, but we are, so we're making interest on that, but just not at the same rate we had a couple of years ago before the pandemic.
What do you say not like it used to be? What's the ballpark we're looking at now?
Well, so a couple of years ago, we probably pulled about $200,000, and we're maybe making $4,000 a month now. And so it's the interest rates are responding with that the same way the rest of the market is. They're just depressed, and it'll probably be a little longer. So where Mike would have been budgeting, in fact, he kind of got caught the year the pandemic kind of happened. We had a lot more money budgeted for interest income than we actually ever realized. But that was adjusted this last year, even the year before. But I hope to have the rest of the statements updated through March that would include all through the capital funds and all that by Friday. I didn't think you guys would shift the meeting a day or so.
And I also want to thank Randy because he's been wearing a lot of hats when it comes to being a controller and other hats as well within this department. Thank you for doing that, Randy. And our hope is that we'll be able to hire a controller and also provide our financial reports to the board in a timely manner.
Yeah, so I do appreciate your patience. We actually, the add-on the controller sets to close on the 28th, so we'll be interviewing shortly after that.
Randy's words were I hope there is someone out there. So he has not looked at the applications yet. He's waiting. I don't know if he did, but that's his hope. I hope there is someone out there. And also all of us hope that there is someone out
So I haven't really had a boring day since even before Mike left.
there.
But we're still really early in the year, so even though you're not seeing the information, I don't believe there's anything to be particularly worried about at this point. We, with our revenue coming in that way and the cash, we definitely have enough to cover what we need to pay.
So what you're saying is there's nothing that you can see right now, but if it's going to be impactful, or plan to expand in this coming year, and that shouldn't be undertaken.
No, not so far.
Okay.
I do have a question. So I know you're working on March and April soon, or I'm sorry, February and March. Will we be going through those during the April?
Yes.
April and
Yeah, so one of the,
board meeting, I'm
yeah, so I want to get these back on track, so you're seeing, like we were before, you see them like that. The other thing I'm doing is growing into Mike's schedule. We did things a little differently, so I'm kind of growing into how we set it up, and so just growing pains.
So I would make a suggestion that for the next board meeting that we go through just the March one.
Yeah.
But we post obviously the February one and send that out to all the board members so we have at least a copy of it and then it's available.
Yeah, my plan actually for today had been to obviously have it out through March, and I was going to start with March. Because, really no sense talking about 2-month-old. Unless there's something really bad in it, and I'm not seeing that.
I think if there's issues, we'll take it into consideration.
Have any comments or questions for me? Well, thanks for your hard work. And I know you've been overworked. We're trying to do two different really important jobs at the same time. And hopefully we get that person in place to take over the comptroller position.
Yep. There's a lot of work to do, but we're getting there. So thank you very much for your patience, Joe.
Okay, moving along, public service report.
All right, so you can see public services, of course, it's been busy. Any questions in regards to the report? So a few things to point out. We had a record, I'm sorry, did you say that?
I said not a question, I was going to.
Yes, sir.
And 2 comments. One is, it's really like having all the pictures in there, because the visual. But with that, I also wanted to point out the new intern with the EDI department.
Yes.
So I've had the pleasure of meeting her a couple times with her involvement with the district. And she's an impressive young lady, so I think that's a real asset to the EDI department having her on board. So.
They are so excited and can't wait for her to start. I was in their new office and saw her space, so it's going to be a nice opportunity, I think, for all of them.
Yeah.
Thank you. So one of the things I did want to point out that I thought was a really nice thing to see is we had a record number of participants for the adult reading program this year. So it was at a little over 3,400, which was up over 459 participants. So it's great to see the activity, people coming out of that. We also saw record participation during spring break for our children's programs that were offered. And as the Department of Family and Children's Services and Young Adults is preparing for summer reading, we are also expecting to see record number of attendance for those programs as well.
Do you have an idea of how many volunteers have already applied for helping out in the summer reading program?
I do not have an idea of how many volunteers have applied for the summer reading program. We have posted for 4 coordinators, 1 for each region, plus with Family and Children's Services. So those have gone out. But I can find out and get back with you.
I was just curious because I know that that's a big volunteer need.
Yes, yes. So we're probably always looking for them, and if anybody is interested, you can apply to be a volunteer on the library website.
Caleb is my home.
Yes.
Anyone have any other comments or questions of Tammy?
I really like the mug.
Oh, yeah, I'll let them know. That's always very important. Yes.
It was a really good one.
It was.
Thank you, Tammy, appreciate it. Okay, moving along here, support services reports, communications facilities, human resources board, technology report. Anybody have any comments or questions on those reports? Okay, I'll move to the interim chief of the librarian report. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so, thank you, Mr. President. Today I just realized maybe it's been what, 3 weeks or so, right? So it's been very good 3 weeks. I had, and I saw Commissioner Williams was here, so I had a meeting with our commissioners, and one of them was Commissioner Holly Williams. We had a meeting at 21C, and that was a great opportunity because that time when the manager of 21C Library was giving us a tour, the studio was in use. And that was very touching to see that we keep making a difference in our community members' lives. So I also had a meeting with Commissioner Bremer, and Brett gave an amazing tour of original history and genealogy. I invite all of you to actually do that tour. I learned a lot about El Paso County there, so that was impressive. And also I met with Commissioner Gonzalez, and all of my meetings went very positively. Also I had a meeting with the county administrator, Brent Waters, and his deputy, Kenny Hodges. And that time, actually, I'm going to brag a little bit about my knowledge of regional history and genealogy. So it turned out that Brett unfortunately was not available, and also Tim. So, but I wanted to show them the treasure and gem that we have here in this complex. So, and I managed with Jamie's Wagner's help, of course. So, and they were also very impressed to see the resources we have there. So, it turns out that mostly I was joking that I spent maybe 20 or 30 minutes in my office, and that time was spent, Michelle's joke is why when the Gazette called for the interview. So it's been busy time being in the community and meeting with our community members, elected officials, and I hope that I will have the meetings with, and their scheduled meetings also with commissioners and of course our city council members as well. So that's in a nutshell. And of course, I want to thank our leadership team for their support and being there for me, and also being patient. And thank you for Tammy for stepping up and taking our public services. So yes, it's been busy but positive and productive 2 or 3 weeks. So I know time is kind of, I don't even remember, but yes. And of course, I wanted to mention today, this morning, we hosted Ukrainian librarians webinar online, and thank you, Colorado Library Association. We partnered with them, and it was an eye-opening, believe experience for all of us to see what they're going through right now, and they still found time to be there and to speak to the importance of how hard they're fighting to preserve their freedoms and preserve their cultural heritage. And also it was very important to me to realize how fortunate we are in this country that we have those freedoms, and hopefully we'll do our best as all of us to continue to preserve those for us and for our children and grandchildren. So yes, any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, board reports, governance committee report.
We did meet and our agenda included the library week update, the proclamations, and those of us that attended. I think everything was pretty well received. Darren and I were at the commissioners. I went to city council. Mina, you went to Fountain. I don't know, did you go to one? Green Mountain, oh, that was it. And Scott, did you get to go to any proclamations? Oh, you went to,
Yeah, that way, right, go further than me.
Yes. Oh, okay, so, and Aaron, you went to Peyton, yeah, or Falcon, yeah, so we all partaked in going to the proclamations. I think it was pretty well received by everyone. We also reviewed and we've had a few revisions or additions to the bylaws. And they have been sent to the communications department so that they can put their appropriate style, writing style to it. And then it will go to our attorney. Hopefully we'll have it back in May for us to board on, for the board to vote on the bylaws, the updates. We also talked about the CEO timeline search. We just started discussing that. We're not in any way or form yet looking to see what we're going to do. We just have to set some parameters in our heads. So hopefully we'll get a search committee by the fall sometime. And we had a conversation with Tiona about her interim CEO goals. We had a little discussion with that because that's part of our duty to do that. So I think that went real well. I personally want to say, Tiona, you just hit the ground running, and I appreciate all the work you're doing. I know it must, I mean, you were always busy before, but now I don't know how you're doing it. And I know that Aaron both were asking about the emails, and from what I understand, and Laura said that there's some work that's being done behind the scenes so they can get that going for us. So that's in the works, and as soon as they get that done, they'll let us know.
And we should be able to have that out to you before the end of this.
Oh, wow.
With the instructions and all of that, Rich's team has been working very hard on it. It's just about gotten us there.
That's great. Thank you, IT. One last thing is there's, all of us have documents to sign at the beginning of the year. Hopefully all of us have signed those. That's just to keep us in compliance and doing the right thing. So if you haven't, please talk to Laura and get those done. That's it.
All right, thank you. Internal Affairs Committee.
In addition to the items that you've already voted on tonight, Gary started a discussion with us about eventually upgrading and replacing the parking meters that we have in a lot. So that's going to be a process. It's not going to be done tomorrow, next week.
Yeah, definitely find out more about the prices and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so just know that we are talking about that. That's it.
All right, Public Affairs Committee.
So Public Affairs Committee met and we discussed the favorable voter polling results that was shared, I believe, earlier
Yes.
in our meeting. And then based on that information, we've essentially decided to move forward in stepping into an exploratory process for building a campaign to promote the library for visibility and awareness of what we do. Then we also discussed the issue of recording our committee meetings, and because our committee meetings are public, open to the public, we decided to not do that and just continue to keep them as a public question. So anybody that's interested is welcome to.
Okay, thank you. All right, the board president's report. I just say that everyone needs to attend here. There's a lot going on. I mean, there's no such thing as a library that just can set your weight. Things happen. There's a lot of things going on. And Tiana's actions, speak for themselves in terms of being involved and making sure things are going on like they're supposed to. I don't think we've lost any ground since John's left. I mean, if you take a look and walk into a library, nothing's really changed in terms of the way we service the community and the services we're trying to provide and the quality of the work we're trying to do, I think it's continued. So that's kind of a pat on the back for all of you and especially the library and the staff that do this every single day. So, and then if you take a look at Randy here, trying to do two major jobs at the same time. I mean, I don't know how either one of us could do that, but anyway. So lots going on here. And so we're doing our best to try to make sure we keep up with what the latest decisions need to be made, the resources that are required. And our job is to make sure we continue to provide the best possible service that a library of our size and shape can do for our community. So anytime any of you have any ideas or things we should be thinking about or a direction we might want to consider going, please let me know. But we don't have to worry about the staff. They are definitely out front and doing their best to reach out to everybody that comes in and those that haven't come in, but reach out to the rest of the folks in the community. So anyway, that's all I have. Anybody else have any comments or questions before we close? Okay, it's 6:15, 6:16, I guess. And I'll consider it closed.
Shakes.